Perfect. I'm now unmuted, even better. 2 seconds. I'll just set this slideshow up. Excellent. Hello, everyone. Hope you are all well this afternoon. So yeah, I'm Sergeant Matt Coe. I'm from the Metropolitan Police. I'm one of the leads for crime prevention. I've worked in the Met for 22 years. My bulk of my career has been in surveillance and undercover work, and then the other half of my career has been in crime prevention work. So I have seen both ends. I have both watched burglars commit crimes, and I have watched prevented crimes in my role in crime prevention. So it's great to be here today. This presentation is going to be hopefully 45 minutes long. I'm going to give you a very light touch on the topic of WIDEN, just for your kind of general kind of information. There's a lot more detail on the Our Watch website, which is very good because I've had a look through it myself, and I think it's very good. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview, a quick run through of WIDEN, and a few bits around the kind of current burglary trends and the current things that happen at the moment across the UK. So without further ado, I'll jump in. So first screen there, your current burglary threats. So certainly probably more of a London focus here, but your communal areas, blocks of flats, thefts of parcels, things like that. So in the last couple of years, the Home Office has changed the definition of burglary. And so any kind of theft that takes place within a residential premises, so the communal stairwells, communal areas, basement, car parks, things like that now get included as a residential burglary. So that's our kind of current burglary threat for London, really, is kind of focused around that. Across the country, there's been a general downward trend in residential burglary, but I am also in the police, and when do we ever say there's been an increase? We always say there's been a downward trajectory, don't we? So it is sort of a genuine one, but I think with COVID over the last few years, it's really made the burglary figures very difficult to kind of parse out as to whether there's an increase or a decrease in general. So although it's a substantial decrease on the screen there, be kind of cautioned around that. COVID's had quite a wide range of effects throughout the whole judicial system. And so, yeah, I wouldn't tend to always go, it's definitely been down by that much as such. But I think when you're looking at your own house and your own crime prevention, I think don't worry too much about the national picture or too much what's happening in your kind of regional area. You really want to have a look at what's happening in your local area. And a great tool, and you've got the web address on there. It's also on the police.uk website as well. There's a wonderful little mapping system. You just tap in your postcode and it shows you all the crimes that have happened on a month-by-month basis over the last couple of years in your area. So on the screen there, you've got where I used to live, down in Crayford in southeast London, and that showed the number of burglaries and where they were roughly, what roads they were on in the last sort of from month of December last year. And I think that's a really useful tool to kind of get an idea of the kind of likely risk that you might have in your own property, or in properties if you're visiting other people, and what kind of risks they may face. And it might kind of inform you on how much you should be spending or how much effort you should be putting into crime prevention. It might help you kind of get a bit of a risk assessment in your mind as to how likely it is that you're going to be burgled or not, such. Oh, hello. That's interesting. 2 seconds. I'll try and get back into that. Excellent. Is it back on the screen now? I think it hopefully is.
Yeah.
So as we move, excellent, perfect. So as I move on. So moving on, if you are a neighbourhood watch coordinator, you may be giving advice to other people, but it's also worth bearing these things in mind. I teach this to officers when they go out and give crime prevention advice, that when they're giving advice, it's not just having a big checklist of you should have a burglar alarm, you should have new doors, new windows, you should hide everything, you should do this, do that, do that. Because it becomes a very overwhelming thing. And I think generally most people, when confronted with a list that's 20, 30 things long, would get a bit panicked about, the whole situation. How can they afford it? How can they do it? This kind of stuff. So if you are giving advice to other people, and I appreciate some people in this call might not be giving advice to other people, but think about the type of building itself. So if it's a flat, a house, multiple occupation, if it's student accommodation, whether they rent it or whether they own it, their kind of ability to not only afford it, but to be able to make those improvements itself. Just keep those things in mind if you are giving advice to other people. And my kind of rule for officers when I'm sort of giving them training in how to deliver crime prevention is to kind of think no cost, low cost, and then go on from there. So I think lots of people can get put off if you kind of come in and go, hey, you should get a new burglar alarm system. It's going to cost you X thousands of pounds to run, especially if you've got a crime map like that one I just showed you, where you've only got a few burglaries, over the course of a month, and perhaps it's not as big a risk as you may think. Just start with the low cost, no cost options. So it could be very simple things that we'll go through as you go through WIDEN. Simple measures such as good garden maintenance, keeping low hedges at the front, keeping good visibility, things like that, putting valuables away and hiding them away, are things that are no cost and low cost and simple to do, and most people can do them, and are great deterrents in their own right. Just because something's not expensive doesn't mean it doesn't have value in deterring the criminal. And the last point here is to know about burglars themselves. And so in my experience, I've followed a lot of them. I've seen them work as such, if you want to call it work. And I'm grateful to the officers at North Yorkshire who went and interviewed many in prison on behalf of the country to see what kind of motivates them and how they work. So looking at CCTV, looking at surveillance work that's been done in the past, most burglars, when they're burglaring a home, won't spend longer than 1 minute trying to get into a residential property. So they'll spend 1 minute perhaps trying to force the door, spend 1 minute trying to get through a window, whatever it may be. But if they can't get in after a minute, they tend to go away. The adrenaline gets the better of them, and so they tend to leave and make a hasty kind of retreat as such. So sometimes you can kind of look at products and you see people hitting with sledgehammers and really going for it to get through properties. But actually, in reality, a burglar is an opportunistic person. They are walking the streets. They are generally feeding an addiction, usually drugs of some kind. They're walking the streets, usually areas that they know quite well, and they're just looking for opportunities. They're looking for a door that's perhaps on a latch, just slightly unlocked. They're looking for a window that's open, that isn't normally open. They're just walking up and down a few roads, and they're just seeing what looks good for them, what looks appetizing for them as such. And so that's why it's important to multi-layer your kind of approach as well. So if you've got a home, invest all your time and effort into one thing. It's generally not as productive as doing multiple things to try and deter and prevent a burglary, because that burglary is just walking past. If they can't see a hiding place for them, if they can't see an open window or an unlocked door, if they can't see valuables through the window, they're going to walk on. Whereas if you've got something very valuable through the window that catches their eye immediately, it's going to draw them straight in, and they're going to then try and get their way into the property itself. So really useful to kind of multi-layer that approach as well. And just before I start into WIDEN, I'm going to talk about a number of security products throughout the whole presentation. And it can get very confusing. There's lots of companies out there. They all claim their product is the best. They all claim that their stuff is high security and reinforced and military grade and all that kind of stuff. And it's a very common thing that companies do to advertise. So as the police service, we only recommend products that meet the police preferred specification. Generally, you'll see this on doors and windows with the Secured by Design logo you see there on the top right. But basically, what this means is that any company can build a composite door or a UPVC door or window or whatever it may be, alarm system, garage door, padlock, whatever it may be. Anyone can do that. Anyone can set up a factory and do that as such. To get a police preferred specification, what you need to do is send it off to a testing house, an independent one that's based in the UK generally, and they will independently test it against a set standard, and we set the standard. So for a residential door, we will say that door should resist an attack for X amount of time, usually a few minutes. I think it's 3 minutes off the top of my head. And here are the tools that you can use to try and break it in. And we let these guys and girls at the testing house, they pick up the tools and they then try and break in for that time period. And if they can't break in, then it's a success. And if they do break in, then it's a foul. And that testing is done on a regular basis for those products that have those kind of logos on there. And that gives you some kind of reassurance that the product has been through a rigorous type of attack, that type of attack is relevant and applies to that kind of door. So I'll talk a bit later about door security, about some of the myths around how burglars break in. I just want to really emphasize the last point on my screen there, that the kind of phrases of high security door are all kind of meaningless, because a high security door doesn't have any value. I would much rather have a door that meets some kind of independent standard that's been kind of tested and approved by the kind of UK policing and Home Office and all the other people that are involved in that process. You've got other companies like Sold Secure and the Master Locksmith Association there as well. They are also companies that do testing that also meet the police preferred specification as well. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Thatcham's another one, generally around car security as well, that all independently test and accredit things in their own name. And again, great people that we've worked with for a long time, and their products do meet that standard. So very happy to sort of look out for products that have those accreditations on them. So looking at the W of WIDEN, well, the simple thing is burglars need to get into the home. And generally it's 3/4 of the time through a door, the rest of the time it's through a window, and very randomly it will be through things like skylights or balconies or through the walls themselves and other things. That's the other 3%. Everyone always asks about that, how else they can break in, and there's all sorts of ways they can sort of get in. But basically it's through a window or it's through a door. Most of the time it's through a door. But don't discount windows from your thoughts, because windows provide two opportunities to a burglar. They provide an opportunity for someone to look in to see if anyone's home. They provide an opportunity to look in to see if there's anything worth stealing. And just because they might ultimately break in through the door, it doesn't mean that they didn't use the windows to facilitate and aid that burglar. So just because they've broken in through the door doesn't mean they didn't look through the window to see what was going on, things like that. So windows are important, not just as a way that someone could break the glass and go through, but also for a way to look into the property itself. So again, we start with that no cost, low cost. So removing valuables from site. So a very sort of say easy one. Sometimes it's not that easy. If you're like myself, I got my home set up today. My work Wi-Fi is not working, so I'm at home. So I have a laptop, I have a monitor, I have a computer. I don't like to move them because they're all set up perfectly for me. So sometimes hiding stuff from site is easier said than done. And it's worth bearing that in mind, I think, when you're speaking to people in their home, that some things they want to have out, they want to have on display, they want to have sight of them. Where you have that situation, you can obscure the windows. Now there's lots of ways to do that, and I've got a few examples on the screen here. So we have the net curtains and the voiles that kind of come down and stop someone from looking in and seeing it easily. You have the window film, a great solution for kind of a more permanent solution. I say permanent, that they kind of go on with a squeegee and some water. They're quite low cost. You get them off places like eBay and Amazon for sort of £10 a square meter, not particularly expensive. And they provide that kind of permanent cover there that stops people from looking in. And I think the real key is to pay attention to windows where the person walking by can see in without looking too suspicious. And I've got a great example in the middle there, slightly exaggerated. You've got the person there's got no front garden, so their windows are directly onto the street. And as you can see there, they've put up some nets. They've got them quite thickly bunched up, so that people walking by can't just look in and see what's going on inside. But that's what burglars tend to do. They tend to, they'll go up to the front door of a house. They'll pretend to be sort of there delivering something, or got a leaflet in their hand or something like that to look as though they're doing something. And while they're there, they're going to have a quick look through the window, a quick look through the door if they can, and see what's going on. And then they're going to make an assessment from there. So burglars aren't just out frantically burgling. They're making their own risk assessments in their head. They're always evaluating what's the chance of getting caught, what's the chance of being seen, what's the chance of me being arrested in the kind of immediate future. Is this risk reward balance is always going in their head. And so if you can hide away some of the reward, make it less visible, or make it more risky because they can't see who's inside the home, then so much the better. And again, reasonably achievable for most people. But getting onto the windows themselves and the security, obviously they are a way to get in. Generally, burglars tend to smash the glass, and then they'll put their arm through the kind of hole that they've made, and they'll use the handle to open the window so they can climb in over the nice sort of glass-free window frame. Burglars don't tend to like to climb in over glass itself because it's kind of painful, to be honest. So obvious kind of point is that it can hurt themselves. Broken glass is always a great way to leave your DNA at the scene. and most burglars are quite knowledgeable around that, so they're not going to encourage leaving their DNA at the scene. So generally they'll break the glass and then they'll try and open the window while putting their hand through. So it's really important. Sometimes these handles, especially on UPVC, don't look very substantial, but they'll stop that burglar from opening and stops them from having a safe and easier way for them to get through. So just be mindful of that. That it's not just all about, people will often go, well, why bother securing the windows? All you've got to do is throw a brick through it. But generally people don't like climbing through glass. And if they do it, they tend to leave blood DNA and clothing DNA and fiber samples and all that kind of stuff that ends up getting them arrested fairly swiftly because it's a really a DNA and evidence forensic goldmine. For those people that perhaps are renting and things like that, and they can't make physical improvements to the locks or anything like that, you can use contact and shock alarms. I've got a picture up there in the top middle. They are eminently quite cheap. I saw a pack of 4 in Aldi for 10 quid the other day. You can kind of on Amazon and eBay. They're perfectly fine. They'll last about a year on the batteries, and then just make sure that you replace them. So if people do install them, just check the battery every so often. And they can have contact ones which go off when the window's opened, or you can have shock ones which detect a vibration in the glass as well. So just a great little low cost measure there. And again, if perhaps you are a homeowner or you're going to be in a place for a long time, you might want to toughen or protect the vulnerable glass. In the top right, you've got a picture there of just some window grills. So retractable ones. You can get ones which are fire compliant because they have an easy thumb turn opening system. Just be mindful of that if you are putting them in, that it's not a fire escape route. They're not particularly expensive. You can get accredited ones, so secured by design ones, or some other accreditation you can get for probably, I'd say again, probably about 100 quid a square meter. So not the cheapest, but also not crazily expensive. You can also, if you've got a particularly vulnerable window, change the glass for laminated glass. And there's various standards around laminated glass, but basically just go for security laminated glass that usually be at a sufficient level. And what that means is if a burglar tries to break through it, it just kind of cracks, but it doesn't give. It doesn't create a hole, doesn't create an opportunity for a burglar to get through. So lots of options with windows. Most of them can be quite low cost and no cost. But if you want something more robust, perhaps you've got a window that's hidden down the side of a property, or is quite vulnerable in some other way, you can think of being quite robust around it with window grills and with laminated glass. So moving on, we're now inside the property, and we're thinking about the interior. So there's 2 elements again. So like windows, there's 2 elements. There's the perspective of someone looking to break in and someone who's already broken in. And here we see a classic picture of an untidy search, as we would describe it, as the police do love to have very technical and unnecessary names for things. So it should just be called an untidy search. And again, when we did the surveying with burglars, we did a virtual reality project with some burglars. We gave them a virtual reality headset. We gave some members of the public a virtual reality headset, and we told them to go and burgle a home in virtual reality. And they walked off down this make-believe street, and burglars would spend quite a long time looking for a property. Again, they'd only spend around a minute trying to get in. But once they were inside, burglars are quite comfortable. They're a lot more relaxed. Their adrenaline is spent getting into the property as such, if that makes more sense. So they spend all their kind of nervous energy trying to get in. I've seen it on surveillance work when I've been out and I've been watching burglars breaking in from a surveillance van or from other hiding place. And they'll get in, and then once they're in, I'm sat there at my watch, and well, perhaps they've gone out through another window, perhaps they've somehow escaped, but they'll spend sometimes around 20 minutes inside a property looking inside, trying to find things. Generally, they do an untidy search like this. They'll pull out all the drawers, they'll tip them upside down, they'll open up wardrobes, they'll take everything out, usually throw it all onto the bed, because the bed itself generally doesn't contain valuables in their opinion. So the bed kind of comes a place where they put things to get them out of the way once they've searched through. Just be mindful of that. It's always worth stopping the burglar getting in, because once they're in, they're just much more comfortable inside a property searching around than they are if you deter them from outside. They're harder to deter from inside as such. Again, keeping valuables out of sight or out of the home. So we've got a picture there of a safety deposit box. So if you have valuables that are very valuable, that perhaps you don't use that often, or you only use on special occasions, high street banks like Metro Bank will do you a safety deposit box for about 20 quid a month, top of my head. Quite a lot of places, very similar prices. They all tend to have accreditation schemes that go with them, so do ask about that if you do use a safety deposit box. But they are valuable if you do have a lot of jewelry, or perhaps a watch that you only wear a couple of times a year and you really want to take care of it and you're not too sure how to keep it safe within the home itself. You can use a home safe, such as on the top right. Be very careful, I'd say, with safes. They have to be installed to the manufacturer's instructions, or they lose their kind of warranty, their insurance guarantee that goes with them. Do look for accreditation. You will find a lot of cheap safes that are really, really easy to open. I would raid a lot of drug dealers and they keep their drugs in a safe, and we would have a locksmith and he would get into it in a couple of seconds. Very easy thing for them to get into if it's not one that's got an accreditation of some kind. So generally for a safe that's got an accreditation, you'd be looking at around about £150 plus, will be my kind of guide point for giving you an idea of what kind of level that is. So if you see a safe in Argos for 40 quid, I can guarantee you it's probably not very good. And again, they'll need to be bolted to the floor, bolted to the wall in whatever way the manufacturer says. So again, making sure that that you do it accurately and correctly is really, really important. Otherwise, if you don't bolt them to the floor, to the wall, I'll tell you very simply, a burglar will just pick it up and they will just walk away with it, and they'll take it to somewhere they know nearby, and they will happily spend the time breaking into it there. They're not afraid of that. They will do that. I've seen it happen, and frankly, as the police, I've done the same. Where I've gone in, I've seen a drug dealer, they don't secure the safe to the floor either, so I just take the safe with me, and at the police station, I'll get a locksmith to break into it there rather than doing it at the scene. In the middle bottom there, again, a low cost kind of solution there for if you've got something particularly valuable. I mean, you can DIY this yourself if you want, or you can buy these for about £4 or £5 on Amazon or eBay or something like that. They're quite good, but put them in a place that is kind of, I'd say the kitchen is usually quite good. So if you've got a Coke cans tend to live in a kitchen. If you put a Coke can and it's in the back of your wardrobe, if I know my burglar, I'm going to obviously spot that that's something that's not usual, and so I'm going to immediately kind of focus in on that. So these kind of imitation things, whether they be cans, whether they be washing up bottles, whatever they may be, just be kind of conscious that if you are going to use them to store valuables, keep them in the area where they are naturally found. Otherwise, they can look quite distinctive. And again, in my work, and you do raids and things like that, they stick out where they're not in a normal place. So backs of wardrobes, on tops of wardrobes, and other funny places where you go, well, why is there a washing up liquid bottle here? Let's have a look inside that and see what's going on. Moving on. The other thing, so you've got the perspective of someone who to break in, so creating the illusion of someone being at home. So in the good old days when I started in the police many, many years ago, so 22 years ago, used timer switches, as you see in the middle picture there, were very common. You put your lamp on a timer switch, it would come on. If you're more up to date and tech savvy than I am, then you can get your smart light bulbs to do it all for you and come on and off, and all that kind of good stuff. You've got smart plugs. The one on the left there's a smart plug, so that can turn on and off anything that's plugged into it at set times, things like that. And my particular favorite, which I quite like because it's something a little bit unusual, is the TV simulator. That's on the right hand side as you look at it. So TV simulator sits in a socket on the wall. It's got a dusk to dawn sensor on it. When the light goes out, it comes on, it flashes very kind of, I wouldn't say dull, but almost like lava lamp type LEDs, kind of flickers green and blue and red very slowly. And it looks from the outside like a TV's being played. And I think, again, if you're burgled on the outside, it's nighttime, and you're looking in and you see a TV being played, why are you going to risk it? You're just going to move on to the next one because you don't want to get caught. You don't want to alert people. You're out to feed an addiction generally. So you don't want to disrupt that opportunity by alerting someone, by having police in the area, by having undue attention drawn to yourself. So you're going to generally try and move on in that situation. So moving on, we're on to the doors. And as I said earlier, the main way burglars get into the home, and mostly those doors are unlocked. So most burglars will, especially UPVC and composite doors, they will go up to them and they will see whether they've been locked correctly or not. And I'll go into that in the next slide. If it's on the latch, same with the wooden door. If it's just on the latch, they know that if they give it a good push, they'll probably get it in without making a lot of noise. So people that don't lock all the locks on the door tend to be vulnerable to that kind of attack as such. And again, doors that are on latches, doors that haven't locked properly, that kind of stuff. Around the back of the house, you go out, you don't bother locking the back door because it's just, I'm only out for 10 minutes and 10 minutes turns into 20 minutes. And again, the burglars are opportunistic. They're just walking down the road, they're seeing the opportunity, they're seeing what's happening, what's going on. That person's just left the home, they're going over the road to the shops. Oh, okay. It takes, I'm only going to be under a minute trying to see if any of the doors are unlocked. I've got try the doors now. Oh, it's unlocked. Great. I'll go in. I'll spend 5-10 minutes inside, and then I'll leave. So therefore, when I talk to the public, or when I train officers to talk to the public, I kind of go along the side of, well, what security do you already have, and do you use it? And if you don't use it, why don't you use it? And I think doors are a good example of that. I see a lot of doors that have several locks down them, and I go, well, do you use them all? And they go, oh no, I can't use all those locks. There's like 3 or 4 locks on one door. It's too much effort. So I just use one, the latch at the top, and I'll just lock that one. So it's really important to sort of, while before people invest in lots of money or make lots of changes to their home, is to look at the habits that you also have as well. So what security do you have? Do you always use it? Or if you don't use it, let's fix those problems. Let's see if there's a solution to that. And that's, I think, sometimes just as valuable as changing a habit is just as valuable as changing a physical aspect of your home. Just look at the habits that you do and go, well, actually, do we lock all the windows all the time? And I think if most of us on this call being honest with themselves, perhaps don't lock all the windows all the time. In summer, do you always unlock and lock them? Well, no, it's a summer, so I unlock it for the start of summer, and it's been hot every day, so it's too much effort to kind of keep locking it and that kind of stuff. Those keys are tiny and small. I've either got hundreds of the keys or none of the keys. I never have the right balance of those window keys with me. So it's sometimes look at those habits that you have and amending them. And as I mentioned before, the less likely burglars are pictured. So these 3 pictures here, I've got them here very specifically for a reason. So we've got the lock picking extraordinaire. We've got the sophisticated cat burglar who goes around picking locks and breaking in. And I can tell you, I've never come across one in 20 odd years. Again, the opportunists, they're out looking for an easy to do. They don't want to spend a lot of time trying to pick a lock. Someone picking a lock is pretty obvious. So if you're a passerby looking at someone, it's kind of a strange thing to be doing, and people are going to be naturally kind of wary of people or seeing what's going on and being quite suspicious. And picking a lock, whilst you've got the adrenaline going through you of being a burglar and thinking, oh, am I going to get caught? What's going on? What do I find inside? Is there a dog inside? That kind of stuff going through my mind. It's quite hard to pick when you're under that kind of pressure. And I do know, and some of you may watch YouTube channel videos of people picking locks, and they pick them very quickly and very easily. Even some good quality names get picked within a few minutes. And all I'd say is that those channels can be great, but if you do watch them, look at how they got the lock set up, and it's always in a very bright, clean, dry environment. They've got it on a table. Sometimes the locks are in a different position. They're upside down to how you normally find them, because it's going to make them a lot easier to pick if they're upside down. And I'll be very surprised to see someone trying to pick a door lock upside down. So take those videos with a little bit of a pinch of salt. They can be picked, but it's around sometimes if you can only pick them at a certain angle and you can't achieve that angle in real life, it's not really a vulnerability to be too worried about. The bottom 2 pictures, again, you see this on the kind of companies that are trying to demonstrate how good their product is, and they'll get a sledgehammer and they'll whack at a door a few times with a sledgehammer and go, look, it's high security, no one can get through this. I've hit it 3 or 4 times with a sledgehammer, and you can't get in. The reality is yeah, I've never really seen a burglar with a sledgehammer either, really, nor a 3-foot-long crowbar. And I think any police officer worth his salt, seeing someone walking down the road with a 3-foot crowbar or a massive sledgehammer is probably going to have a little bit of a chat with them. That's not going to end too well for them. So burglars don't tend to carry around large and heavy and very obvious tools with them, because it increases the chance of getting risked. Passers-by are going to spot it. Hey, there's a guy walking down the road with a sledgehammer. you know, you or I are probably going to phone 999 and go, hey, there's a guy walking down the road, looks a bit odd, and he's got a massive sledgehammer on him, so things could be getting a bit dicey. So most burglars, when they go out with tools, they go out with a torch, usually on their phone, and they go out with a screwdriver, and they, pair of gloves. That'll be about it, because they don't want to get pulled over by the police. They don't want to have a load of tools on them, because they know they're going to get arrested. They don't want to cause a load of suspicion. They don't have things hanging out of them, or you know, trying to hide a crowbar down their tracksuit trousers, which looks, you know, very strange. They're going to want simple tools that they can carry with them, or they can acquire from your back garden, maybe. So perhaps if they do use a sledgehammer, it's one they found in a shed or something like that, or a paving slab they found in the back garden that they thrown through a window. So I always like try and counter this, that just because a door company goes, oh, we haven't got any accreditations, we haven't had it tested, but I've hit it in the backyard with, you know, a big sledgehammer, so it must be fine. But that's not how burglars attack. And when you get an accredited door that's been tested properly, they test it how a burglar would attack it, rather than how, you know, a window company would like their product tested. Because resisting a sledgehammer attack is fairly simple for a door, especially a composite multi-lock door. They're going to resist a sledgehammer attack no matter really how badly they're made, but they'll struggle against things like screwdrivers and things that can provide a tremendous amount of pressure on a very little point. So they can usually pop latches and things like that with screwdrivers and the like. So do be careful of, you know, brochures and things like that that have these kind of pictures on there. So I'm not going to go into a very in-depth, detailed discussion around door security, because it's very complex and there's lots and lots of things to do. What I'd want to do is basically go, this is the aim of door security. You want to try and make that door as strong as the wall around it while still being usable as a door. So don't put 10 locks on a door, because then it's not a usable door, because it's going to take you half an hour to get in and half an hour to get out. You're going to want a door that you can escape from in a fire and things like that. So that's really important to kind of bear in mind as well. And so, yeah, so again, we've got a picture there on the right-hand side. There's lots of great advice on the Our Watch website. There's lots of great advice on the Met Police website, which I've got the details for there. The Door and Hardware Federation, the Master Locksmith Association, all of them have got really good kind of advice on your particular door type. There's so many different types of doors, and if you've got glass panels, if you've got spy holes and letterboxes and vulnerabilities around them. But I'd say go back to the crime risk. If half of all burglaries happen through an unlocked door, then the first kind of answer is, well, lock the door, and that reduces your crime risk by half via that method. So sometimes it's easy as a kind of technical professional that I am, to get into real details about what type of hinge bolts to use and how many locks and how far up the door they should be placed and how far down and all these kind of things. But actually, I think at the real kind of core, it's you're trying to make that door as strong as the wall around it, and as usable as you can make it as well. Got the new door standard on the top right there, in case anyone is in the market for a new front door. PAS 24 2022 has just come out, so you probably find the 2016 still out there. Both are perfectly good standards, and again, will give you that kind of comfort and reassurance that it does meet a set security standard. So, like I said, do you lock the doors? If you have a door that a door at all, especially a Euro cylinder door, so if you've got a PVC or composite door, does it have 3 stars or a diamond on the end of the lock? I think the picture I've got there has got 3 stars, but sometimes it'd be a nice little diamond underneath, and that's all around lock snapping. So if you look at that picture in the middle, you'll see a little where the key goes in, about a centimetre down. There'll be there's a little band around the outside of the lock, and that's a snap-in point. So if someone tries to lock snap, I recommend you YouTube it, have a look at lock snapping. It'll be quite terrifying if you don't have it. But basically, burglars will come along with a pair of pliers. They'll twist the lock back and forth until it snaps in the middle with a black point with the little notches on that middle picture. When it snaps there, you can use a screwdriver to push out the other side of the lock, and you can then turn the lock yourself from the outside. So for Euro cylinder doors, so PVC composite doors, really important they've got a 3-star or a diamond on. If it's a wooden door, just that the lock's got a kite mark on there, that will be absolutely splendid. If the door is a handle, so like a UPVC or composite door is a handle, make sure that you lift it when you lock it. The lifting is the part that puts all the multi-point locks into position. Some very new doors will do that automatically, but most doors out there, you need to lift that handle to engage all the multi-point locks. So lift, lock, remove is one of the slogans that we have used in the past. And here we see a typical front door. I'll take typical front door because it's my front door. So I am one of the leads for crime prevention. I have a door from the 1980s that if it is really windy, will tend to blow open in the wind. So I'd love to replace it. It's going to cost around about £2,500 to replace that door and side panel from the current quotes. So I'm always reluctant to pay money, unfortunately, as my wife would say. But I've got that door. That's what I've got. If I was renting, I was willing to change that door. So I think it's a good example here of how you can make some small improvements just to improve what you have already in where I live is a fairly low risk area. So on the inside, I've got some sash jammers. You can see them on the very right-hand picture, the little red circles around them, or they're in the middle picture, the small one there. Sash jammers, they're perfectly fine. They cost about a tenner from Amazon or eBay or somewhere like that for a branded company anyway. Just screw into the aluminium and they flip them across that night, and it stops anyone from being able to push that door open because it hits the jammers on the inside. So 2 metal bars on the inside that it struggles to get through. You can get ones like the one at the bottom left on the screen, which have a look on the outside. So which I didn't know about at the time, but it is a product that the Master Locksmith Association showed me. And it just means that when I go out, I can also lock it from the outside as well. Whereas at the moment, this is only really for use when I'm at home or at night. I've also got a nice little video doorbell there, so I can see outside. I can see what's going on because that stained glass is very useful for seeing what's outside. So I've got that there to monitor who's out there. I can see what's going on. It's got motion detection, so I can see what's happening. I've got those lights that provide that additional support for that camera so they can see what's going on. And also because it kind of highlights anyone that's around the door that shouldn't be. And obviously I'm going to talk about neighbours in a minute, but my neighbours all know me, they all know my family. And so if anyone who's not that is going to kind of attract suspicion, and those lights will tend to highlight that person. So moving on, I think I'm moving on from doorbells to the exterior. And the exterior is really, really important because it's the earliest opportunity to deter a burglar. I've told you already that they'll spend a minute trying to break in. And so if they're going to spend a minute trying to break in and they're opportunistic, the easiest and earliest way to do it is for them to be walking down the road, to look at your home and to just carry on walking. And I think that's the real advantage of improving the exterior to make it more of a deterrent to a burglar. And really, most of the time, if you talk about a traditional house or block of flats, you're trying to present an exterior which passers-by can easily see and the home occupants can easily see. You won't give the burglar that kind of adrenaline rush, that kind of feeling, that nervousness that they're going to be spotted or they're going to get caught in the act. You want them to be at your door or window and looking around over their shoulder going, it's not worth it, and then moving on elsewhere. So that's really, in terms of the exterior, what you should be trying to aim for. Lots of ways to do this. We've got the classic picture in the middle of generally keeping your hedges under kind of 50 centimeters high, and at the back of your home keeping fences over 2 meters high, or 1.8 meters plus some trellis on top. It's generally the kind of rule that we go for, so that basically if a passersby walking by, you can see what's going on. And the picture on the right is a good example. You've got a hedge that's a bit overgrown. You've got a tree where the canopy's coming down quite a bit. And actually, a burglar might look at that and go, oh yeah, it's a communal door. You know, they look at it, they go, it's a glass door, lots of glass panels. I can probably pop a panel and get my arm in. People can't really see me that easily, you know, so perhaps they might think it's worth it. But I think if that tree and that hedge were tidied up a little bit, it would make it a bit too visible, and then perhaps a burglar might think twice before going past. Lighting's always a topical issue, particularly in the built-up areas that I work in. Exterior lighting, what we're really trying to do is enable yourself to see outside and see what's going on. And you don't need to really have these kind of very high-powered, motion-activated lights. There's a few reasons for that. So on my house, the picture that I showed before, Those lights come on at dusk and they go off at dawn. They provide light all night round. So again, so the camera can see what's going on and can record what's going on. So it helps assist that. And if I need to look out the window because I hear something outside or something's going on, I can look out the window and I can see easily across the front of my home. Just the same for the back of the house as well. If something goes on, I can look at the back window and I can see a good, even, natural spread of light coming out. When you have those really high-powered halogen specials, as we like to call them, which again are very cheap, but they're usually 500 watt. They do what happens in this photo on the left. Firstly, they're quite annoying, being blunt, so they go off quite often. And when you have something goes off quite often, you tend to ignore it after a while. They cause quite a bit of light pollution, so they can kind of annoy neighbours and upset them, which again kind of goes against the kind of ethos of neighbourhood watch, that you don't want to be upsetting neighbours with a great strobe light coming through the bedroom window every night. But the important thing, if you look at that picture there, is that it creates shadows. So although I can see very easily what is around that light, I cannot see what's behind it because the light is cast in one very specific direction. It's focused light. That's why those halogen bulbs are kind of encased in that kind of small rectangular box. So it basically focuses the light in that kind of beam coming down. And when you do that, you create shadows where that light isn't. So sometimes you have lighting which goes up, they put it up on the wall on the outside of a house, they point it outwards, as you would do, because it's kind of the convenient point to wire the electrics in. And what it ends up doing is creating a dark shadow by the edge of your home. And the burglar can then go there, the light goes off, doesn't matter, no one pays attention to the lights going off. We all know that. That's just the reality of life. They got to the edge of the house and now they can be comfortable because every time that light goes off, it puts them into a shadow and actually assists them in committing the burglary in the first place. So with exterior lighting, we go for kind of low wattage LED, generally at kind of head height, and that's just a dusk to dawn sensor, providing that natural even spread of light throughout the evening. Works wonders, much better than those big powerful halogen bulbs, and also better for the environment and your wallet as well at the moment. So on to Neighbours, the last section of this presentation. And I think Neighbours have more of an impact than they sometimes think. So people you don't always realise what impact they can have. And I think there's two areas where good neighbours have an impact. I think there's a very local, in your road, that kind of neighbour. And then I think there's also the bigger society neighbour. So neighbourhood watch, the signage, the neighbours that are watching out for each other, it does alter the offender's perception of risk. They're walking down the road, they don't want to get caught. Yeah, that person generally, and I'm being very stereotypical here, they want to get drugs. They want to, they have a need they've got that urge. They need to get the drugs. So they want to go out. They want to get into a property. They don't want to be any alarms to go off. They don't want anyone to catch them. They want to take something that they can then dispose of very quickly and exchange for drugs, or exchange for money, then exchange for drugs. So when they see a neighbourhood watch area, why would they bother? They're just going to go to the next area. They're going to go elsewhere because it just alters their perception. I don't want to get caught. Because if I get caught, then I can't have my drugs. They sometimes don't mind about being caught a few weeks later from forensics or DNA. And we've had burglars that go, I don't care if I get caught later. I don't care how many fingerprints leave behind because I need drugs now. And what happens in 2 weeks happens in 2 weeks. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the here and now. And sometimes you've got to look at things from a burglar's perspective rather than just a police officer's perspective or your own kind of perspective. It's just around what their needs are at that moment. I think obviously Neighbourhood Watch encourages all the residents to consciously consider their home security. And again, good neighbours watch out. And I think that the picture on the bottom right is my demonstration of that. So that is my house again from the other angle, for another camera that I've got, because hey, I work in crime prevention, so I've got cameras everywhere because that's just the way it is. But this is 12:30, so just gone midnight. My next door neighbour's house, the alleyway there goes to my next door neighbour. They've got a young lad who lives there. He's about 17, just turned 18 now. And these two chaps rock up about 12:30 midnight. And so if I didn't know my neighbours that well, I would probably just assume, oh, they're just friends turning up late, that kind of stuff. But I kind of looked at them. I looked at their kind of mannerisms. The time of night was a little bit strange. It was all a little, didn't quite add up, but would have been easy to ignore. But if they are friends of my neighbours, they would have no problem with me going out there and having a chat because I know my neighbours and it won't be an issue. So again, so I could go out there and I'll spare you the picture of me chasing after them in my pajamas. But ultimately, they were trying to break into my next door neighbour, and then because of that kind of neighbourly spirit, that's 2 burglars in custody by the morning. So I think that's a great demonstration of just if you speak to your neighbours, if you get to know your neighbours, you don't have to be best friends with them, you don't have to live around their house. I'm not best friends with them, but I just know the kind of habits, I know the kind of things that kind of cars that drive down the road and all that kind of stuff, especially if you work from home for now. You get to know that stuff quite intimately, and actually it's really, really useful, and stuff that sticks out, you call it in. And people always, this is the part where people will go, oh, well, if I call the police, no one ever turns up. And that can certainly happen. Suspicious things happen, and sometimes there's not officers available, or officers are going to something that's graded more urgent. But other times, and the top right picture is a good example, other times you'll call in something that's suspicious, and there's a surveillance team that's been watching for something suspicious in that area. And I'll recall a story that I mentioned to Deborah and Sandra earlier. I was in Lewisham. I was tasked with trying to find who'd been burgling some garages in a very small area. So if anyone here is from Lewisham, around the Blackheath Hill area. So I had an unmarked car out with myself in, another unmarked car out with someone else in. I had 2 plainclothes cyclists out to cover all the alleyways. And we were in this area. We'd been doing it for a few days. We hadn't really had much going on. And then we had a phone call come in. Oh, I've seen someone there. I think they were looking at my garage, but I'm not too sure whether to call it in or not. And within seconds, he's got 2 cars hurtling around the corner, a couple of cyclists coming around, and we catch the guy, and it's the person we've wanted for ages. And he was just, oh, well, I don't think you'd be that interested because he hadn't taken anything and he hadn't got in and he hadn't done that. It's like, well, sometimes it may seem unimportant to you, but actually there's a whole policing operation that's been going on for a week around it. And other times you'll phone stuff in, you think this is really important, and you won't get a response. And I wish we could always provide a response. We can't always provide a response. But that is the nature of policing and the nature of prioritising, and the kind of, without getting too political, the massive changes in policing over the last sort of 20 years from when I joined have had a considerable effect. So if you do see stuff that's suspicious, do call it in. Don't be worried about calling it in and being ignored. If it is ignored, or you feel it's ignored, just keep on doing it. If you see it again, just keep on. And one time you might get that chance when you've got that unmarked car that's just like, oh yeah, we've been looking at that guy for ages. Great, thanks for that. And these 2 are exactly the same. A couple of moped thieves, they were trying to get to my neighbour's shed to take a moped. There'd been a series of break-ins around in the local area, and so I'd obviously found them and chased them pyjamaless, but I had slippers on, so that was good. So I wasn't completely unprepared. And a great result. And I think you can all have that great result as well. So moving on. The other thing that neighbours can do is take ownership of an area. So an area that looks cared for and managed is a risk to criminals. They don't want to get caught. And I am one of those neighbours, I'm afraid. I don't know if you are, but I am. If I see a pothole, if I see littering, if I see fly tipping, I report it to the council. And the council love it. I'm sure they do. I'm sure they're very grateful for all my emails. But the reality is that in today's society, in today's world, local authorities do not go looking for problems. They do not drive down your road. They do not collect litter on a regular basis. They do not do these things, certainly where I live anyway. So if there are problems, there are issues, you have to phone it in. And so that's what I do. And we had a fly tipping spot just opposite my house that used to get fly tipped all the time. And it's now been 6 months since anyone's dumped any rubbish there. It was never a lot of rubbish. It was all like a small amount of rubbish. But as people keep going there to keep removing it, people pay more attention to it. They can see someone's taking ownership, and they get nervous. They go, oh, perhaps I won't fly tip here anymore. Perhaps I'll go elsewhere. Where that is not perhaps my concern as a resident, as a neighbour anyway. But the point is that by taking that bit of ownership, by taking a bit of aggressive ownership of some of these problems, you can actually have a big impact on a solution. And littering's the same. You used to get quite a lot of litter down the roads, and now it's a lot less because it gets picked up. If a street looks clean and tidy, people don't tend to litter. If it looks messy, they tend to litter, and that kind of stuff. And again, for the burglar, if you see a street that has all these features in, what do you think of the street? What do you think of the the likelihood that people are going to look out for each other. What do you think, that neighbour's going to call the police? They're not going to call the police. You're going to go, oh, it looks like a, looks like a dump, so I'm not going to bother. I'm not going to worry about neighbours calling the police. They're not going to. So do report on things like that. And so, talking about the wider societal parts that neighbours can have, you can have a massive impact. Feedback to councillors, MPs, local policing leads. Look, as a sergeant, I've been on the receiving end of many of these, and I wouldn't say they're always fantastic, but it's really, really useful. If you tell, I was a neighbourhood sergeant for a while, and yeah, sometimes you're highlighting problems that I didn't know existed. So actually, it might be a really big issue for you, but it doesn't come up on the police radar. I've done webinars around pet theft and things like that. It's just not something that comes across my radar. It doesn't come across my screen. My local priorities might be, let's say, robbery. So I haven't got an eye on the burglary issues at the moment, because I'm getting pulled from here and there. So yeah, I absolutely really recommend feedback to MPs, local police leads. Yeah, absolutely deluging them with complaints. That's always fun, but also tell them what works. Go, hey, it was great to see officers on patrol at X, Y, and Z. Hey, it was great. It was really noted by the residents of XYZ road. It's really, really, really useful, especially when time is so precious. Sometimes, certainly in policing, we really struggle to get out and provide a service at times. And I'm sure the chat bar has got many of those things in there, but it can happen. So we've got to try and do feedback. Is really, really useful. And the last point there, responding to surveys. Neighbourhood Watch is probably the reason why the Met's policy around burglary attendance has changed, because we didn't used to go and attend burglary victims. We changed from that. We just email you and go, sorry, you've been burgled, here's a reference number. And we'd very rarely visit a burglary victim, all in the name of, let's say, saving costs, but in order to free up officers to do other things. I think it's essentially probably the best way to describe it. And it was only because I'd surveyed Neighbourhood Watch members, other members of the public, and I came back with quotes from them. I was burgled and I didn't get a service. All I got was an email saying your case has been closed and a reference number. And when I can present that to senior officers and, frankly, I wouldn't say embarrass them, but embarrass them and go, well, this is the response that the public think you have at that moment. So how are you going to build more trust? How are you going to have less crime? How are you going to do all these things when the public think you don't care? And I think responding to surveys and responding to things like that, I know Neighbourhood Watch does a great deal of them, really does have a big impact. And it certainly changed that policy. Within a couple of months of me doing that, all of a sudden there was a magic pot of police officers that appeared, and we decided to deprioritise some other things to put that in as a priority again. So that was really great way in which neighbours came together and made a change for the better. And that is it from me. Deborah, I'll hand over back to you. And for any questions, I suppose.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. That was, loads and loads of food for thought. So, really good points there, particularly like the one about the exterior lighting and the shadows. It's not something I personally had thought of. And great advice as well as on reflecting on our habits and seeing what we can actually change before we invest in spending money. But again, you really highlighted that there was a lot we can do on small budgets as well. So thank you so much for that. I am going to share a screen now, and then I'm going to put some questions to you, Matt. I've got quite a few come in, but I will share screen just for anybody who does need to go. Thank you very much. But if you can please stay, that would be really great. And if you can scan that QR code before you go and give us your feedback, that would be really good. But Matt, if you're happy to stay on, I've got some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no problem at all.
Great. So just bear with me. Just get them up. Okay, so I think the first question that we have is, do burglars scan the same area more than once to see what security lights go on at the same time, to see which lights go on and off so they can target a house?
So generally no, I'd say. So I've, like I said, I've done quite a bit of surveillance. So I'll be following people on foot or following people in cars, or I'd have static vans set up with cameras. So sometimes they might do a couple of laps, but really they're looking out for who else. So perhaps they're going down a road at, say, 2 in the morning, and they're looking at what other homes are awake at that time. And then they're kind of making that assessment from there. So the lights, I wouldn't say I've ever seen anyone really deterred by the lights, but they look down and go down a road and they're like, let's keep an eye out. Well, I really like the look of that house over there. but I'm a bit nervous that that house is awake. So I'm going to do a couple of laps, and then I think that one's definitely asleep. I walk past their house, I can't hear anything going on. I'm going to go over the road and try and break in. So that's generally what I'd see.
Great, thank you. We've got a couple of questions come through on windows. So how effective are double glazed windows? Will a brick go through one? And is laminated glass the same as double glazed?
So laminated glass is different from double glazed, and glass. Yeah. So all double glazing is really two panes of normal glass that are sandwiched together with a gas in the middle. So you could throw a brick and yeah, it'll go straight through. So laminated, essentially what they do there is they put a sheet of plastic, generally on the inside, sometimes on the outside, depends on the glass manufacturer. And that plastic just holds together that glass. So it will still smash, but it will just keep its shape. So it won't create a hole or anything like that. It will keep its shape. You can also buy things like security film. They're less effective, but they'll tend to try and keep that glass together in one piece. And you can apply that to a normal pane of glass. And again, that's not particularly, again, that's an eBayable Amazon type job that you can do. Not as good as laminated glass, but yeah, absolutely. So yeah, normal double glazed glass will just go through like normal glass would. Again, there's a noise element that burglars don't particularly like, but all the same, it's not tricky, to be quite honest.
Okay, thank you. A couple kind of more general questions. So are most burglaries around the country undertaken by people on drugs? And also, are burglaries decreasing due to the number of people working from home now?
Yep. So I think, again, when I said about COVID being this kind of wild card factor, definitely that. So people are working from home, so there's just less opportunity. So someone like myself, I can look out the window here and I can see my street, and I can see the back of another street as well. So they've essentially got a fully working police officer looking over the security of that road and the gardens, whereas before, obviously, I would be in work every day at the office. So definitely COVID's an impact on that. So that's why I would say it's difficult to look at the figures and see how genuine, I suppose, they are in terms of the burglars have just changed their kind of method. They're doing something else instead in terms of crime. And the other question I forgot, sorry. The two questions there.
Are burglaries decreasing due to the number of people working from home?
Oh, so yeah, so I'll answer that one. So yes, there's around drugs as well. So generally, yes, drugs. On your average, and again, my experience is mainly in the city, London. It might be different elsewhere, but generally, it's drug enabled. If you're perhaps more rural, then you might have organised groups that go out burgling. But those same principles generally apply. Even when we have really organised crimes like armed robberies and smash and grabs and things like that, 1 minute, and if they haven't started to succeed by then, they're going to generally go. So I'd say most burglars, no matter the motivation, generally they won't spend more than a minute trying to get in unless they've got some particular, very specific goal in mind.
Okay. So a couple of questions around kind of what do you do how do you tackle a drug dealer in your neighborhood without getting attacked? And then also, what do you do if you find a burglar inside your home?
Yep. So yes, so two great questions. So if you've got a property in your area that's drug dealing, I would build up that rapport with the local policing team. So like I said, I was on the neighbourhood team. Drugs were a big factor of where I worked in terms of suppressing the drug dealers, suppressing the crack houses that came up. And when you had a member of the public that could give you some good detail around what was going on, even if it was just by email the next day. So having that kind of one-to-one, so I would swap phone numbers or I'd swap email addresses with a resident who would go, that place is causing me absolute grief. And I'll be like, great, just email me every time something happens, because then we can pick out patterns, we can see what's going on. Oh, this car's turned up, great. So I can do something around that car, see what dealer's being supplied by what dealer and things that I can build up a much bigger picture. So it doesn't have to be terribly involved, but I would try and find, most neighbourhood teams details on the kind of police websites, get hold of their details, go, look, I've got this issue. If you're happy to pass stuff over to them, that's how I do it. And then that way you go. If you don't get a response, then again, the councillors, the MPs, the people like that you will get a response from the police then. That's perhaps not the right thing to say or the right way to go about it. But if you're hitting a brick wall with outright criminality in your area, then yeah, your local councillor represents you. That's their job, is to go to the police service that your council tax pays for, as well as your other taxes pay for, and go, hey, this is a problem that's been going on, and they're not seeing a resolution. And they might get told, look, it's part of a bigger job. You won't see what's going to happen until it happens. And sometimes that's happened with work that I've done, where I've had to leave a crack house going for about 6 or 7 months because there was a bigger job by a bigger team of people that know more about bigger fish to fry, and they're like, you're going to leave that alone? I'm like, okay, I'm leaving that alone for 6 months, and then one day it all gets resolved. And sorry, there was 2 questions there.
Oh, I think I might just move on to a few more, because we've got quite a few to cover.
Go for it, that's fine.
So just maybe a quick one here. What time do most burglaries occur? This person thought was in the afternoon, is that right?
Yeah, so generally it is the afternoon. So usually around that kind of 3 to 5 p.m. slot. So generally I've run out to get the kids from school, so I've left the door on a latch, or I left it unlocked. Almost a guilty party here, because the school's just down the road, so I'll just go and do that. So a great opportunity for a burglar to be walking the streets and spotting what's going on, and they can go, oh, that person's just left. They've got a car with a child seat in the back. I know exactly where they're going. They're going to the school. There'll be 20 minutes, and that gives them a definite time frame and a definite empty house. So yeah, it is a peak time, and again, the night time is the other kind of peak time as well. And people getting in from work. So we've had quite a few in London recently where people have just come in from work. They've opened the door, they've shut the door, but they don't lock it. So then the burglar comes in behind them, takes the car keys out. They're not, or takes the bag that's been left by the door, and they're gone. They don't go into the home because they know people are there. But we've had quite a few of them recently as well.
Thank you. And I'll just try and get a couple more in. Richard has asked, what's the realistic dangers of mobile angle grinders? They are noisy, but he knows lots of people who've had motorbikes stolen or shed padlocks taken out with them. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, so it's definitely an issue. So I think it's a few things. Firstly, you've got to be confident enough to walk around with an angle grinder. So you're looking at more your organised groups. So these will be people that go around in vans, to take mopeds and things like that, take bicycles, because if you're your average drug addict walking around with an angle grinder, is going to get you get arrested quite quickly. So I would say it's generally slightly more organised people, and there is a new security standard launched by Sold Secure, which I think's Motorcycle Diamond, which is angle grinder resistant. So it withstands a 3-minute attack with an angle grinder. But yes, it is an issue, and one what we are looking at. It's trying to get the technology of crime prevention to catch up to the sheer aggressiveness of using an angle grinder. And that's also why we say multi-layer that approach. So just relying on a padlock or just relying on one thing, you need to have a few things in place. So parking that motorbike in a good, well-lit area with passers-by, with a couple of different types of lock, makes it exponentially harder to angle grind through without getting caught.
Thank you. And I'll squeeze one more. Julia said her door lock doesn't have a key lock inside. It's a thumb turn. Is that an issue?
No, so that's very standard. All new builds will have that. So that's around fire escape and egress. The only issue that you used to get is kind of gone out of fashion a little bit, is that sometimes they can use the letterbox to get an arm in and try and unlock. If it's a new door, it should have a letterbox restrictor, so your letterbox will only open sort of 2/3 of the way, it won't open fully. And if you don't have one of them, you can buy ones which will adapt your current letterbox to that quite cheaply. TS008 is the standard from memory, maybe 7 for letterbox restrictors. But that's the only risk, is that someone could do that. But it's something that we did have a spike of a few years ago and has kind of eased off a fair bit since.
Fantastic. Final one I'm going to squeeze in.
Go for it. No problem at all.
How safe is it to go out leaving your window locked in the vent position?
Yeah, so there's a few schools of thought. So when a window is tested as such against those standards that I've mentioned before, it's tested when it's locked and shut. So it's not tested when it's ajar, basically. So there's kind of an unknown element. It is obviously easier to get things like tools in there. But that said, if it's got a good multi-point lock, you've increased the risk, but I wouldn't say you've increased it too much, is my honest answer. If you've got a good window that's come from a good manufacturer that meets those kind of security standards. If you leave it on a latch, yes, you could get a crowbar and you've got a bit of a lever point, but you've still got probably 2 or 3 bolts that are holding it in. And I'd struggle to see someone really doing that. I've not seen anything like that that's come up.
Thank you. And I just want to say an absolute massive thank you. I know you'll be running another presentation with us. If there's any questions that we can catch up on, we might email them to you and send them out with the presentations.
Perfect. No problem at all. Yeah.
But thank you so much. It's been absolutely valuable. I know there's lots of thank you messages if you get to see them in the chat.
Yes, I'll have a look in a second. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for hosting me.